saving, and that's obviously if it is pending. So let's give this a try. I'm just going to say beach tunes and then some relaxing songs for the beach, ... And then I'm going to choose a file which is beach. Then I'm going to create it. Watch this. We see saving and it's disabled. And then when it's finally done, it goes back to create and we can see playlist added. Let's just check that's worked. We can see another document over here. If I go up here, we can see beach tunes by Mario. And then if we go to the storage, we should see the beach document or the beach image right there. So remember, we already had a beach image. It's just overridden the previous one because it was the same name, but it doesn't matter. It's still there. And that document we just saw inside the Firestore is associated with that image because we have the public URL inside our documents. Okay. I'm going to just go to Cloud Firestore instead of repeatedly hitting the back button, but we can see we have the URL right here to our images. So they are associated. Awesome. So now that is pretty much everything working. We can now create new playlist documents. Okay then, so now we can add new playlists and upload images. I've got a bit of a challenge for you. What I'd like you to do is list out all the playlists inside the home view right here using a real-time listener. So what I'd like you to do is get real-time data from the playlists collection, and remember to do that we can use the get collection composable, and then output two conditional items, the error if there is one, or the playlist titles, so a list of playlist titles if you can get that real-time data. So give this a whirl, you should be able to do this, pause it right here, and then when you want to see my solution, just press play again. Alright then, so this is relatively simple. The first thing we need to do is import get collection because this is the thing that sets up a real-time listener to a specific collection. And remember, we passed that collection in right here. So let's import it at the top over here. I'm going to do it below the comments. So we import get collection from the composables folder, then get collection. Now inside our component, we can create a setup function whereby we use this get collection composable. And from that, we can get an error and the documents. If we take a look, it returns at the bottom error and documents. So let's grab both of those. So first error and then documents. All right, so we set that equal to get collection and we pass in the collection we want to set up a real-time listener for, and that is the playlists collection. Okay, so we have that error and we have those documents. We need to return them so we can use them inside the template. So return the error and the documents. Okay then, so inside the template, I'm going to delete this paragraph tag. And what I'd like to do is output an error first of all, if there's an error. So let's do a div with a class of error. And inside that, we'll just say could not fetch the data. Now you could use the error that we receive right here, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm just going to output this so a user sees this. Now we only want this to be output if there's an error, so if this has a value. So we'll use v-if on this and set it equal to error like so. So now this only shows if there's an error. Now the next thing we want to do is output the documents if there are some documents. So I'm going to do a div for that, and I'm going to apply a v-if to this as well, and that's going to be if documents. So if this has a value, then we'll output them, because initially if we take a look at get collection, the value of this is null, so it will be false if we can't get the documents. If it does get a value, it will be true and it will output this. So inside here we're going to cycle through the documents, and to do that I'm going to do another div, and let me create that first of all, div, and then close it off. This is going to have a v-for directive, and it's going to be for doc in documents. We have access to documents right here, and we need to attach a key to this. So colon and then key to data bind, and that's going to be the doc.id, because every document has an ID property. We can take a look at that right here. When we push a new object to the documents, they all have an ID property. So we can use the ID as the key. And then inside here, all I'm going to do is output the doc title like so. And remember, if we take a look at the data over here, that is this property right here. So fingers crossed this all works. I'm going to go back to the home page by clicking on this, and I'm going to refresh, and now we can see both of these two titles. All right, so this is working. And if we add in a new document, let me just open up the playlists create page on a new tab. So I'll copy that. I'm going to paste it in a new tab over here and bring that over, just so we don't have to refresh the home page. And then I'm going to add in a new title. I'll say road trip music, any old description, and then choose a file. This is going to be this road trip picture. I'm going to create this, and over on the home page we should see this in real time once it's been added, and we see that pop in right there. Awesome. So this is now working. We now have a real-time listener set up, and we're outputting that data in our home page. So for each playlist, we're eventually going to show four things. We're going to show the thumbnail on the left. We're also going to show the title. We're going to show who created it, so their username, and also how many songs are in that playlist. So let's flesh this out. Inside, I'm going to create a div with a class of singles so that we can style that later on, because this is a single playlist. Now on the left, we're going to have the thumbnail. So I'll do another div with a class of thumbnail again, so we can style this later. And inside here, we just need an image tag. Now the source of this is on the playlist. Remember, it's the URL we have right here, cover URL. So we need to use this property. So we need to data bind to this source attribute right here, like so, and then we can just output playlist, which is the document dot cover URL, and that is going to get us, oops, we need to do this correctly, U in a capital, and then RL is not capital. So that is going to get us the URL for that image, and it's going to output it now on the screen. So we can get rid of alt, and what I'm going to do is just demo this. So let me save it and come over here and refresh. And we don't currently see anything, so I'm just going to inspect and see if we have an error. And it says playlist was accessed during render but not defined on instance. So let me take a look at that. I'm going to come over here. It says props. Okay, we've misspelt playlists, or I have at least. So let's save that, and now hopefully this will work. And now we can see these thumbnails. So that's all it's listing now, the 3 thumbnails. Now we also want to list the title and the person who created it. I'm going to put both of them inside a div with a class of info. It's playlist info, right? Now inside that we'll do an h3 for the title. So out here we'll say playlist dot title to output that, and underneath that I'm going to do a paragraph tag and say created by, and it will be the playlist dot user name. Okay, so both of those properties exist on the playlist, so we can output those, save it, and we can see the title and the person who created it, right? And then finally, we want to output the number of songs in that playlist. So let's do another div with a class of song-number, so we can style it in a minute. And then here we'll do a paragraph tag and output the length of the array of the songs. So if you take a look at the data, we have a songs array. All we need to do is find the length of that array, and that gets us how many songs are in the playlist. So right here, I'm going to say playlist.songs, that's the property of the array, and then we want the length of that array. So it should be 0 to begin with, and we should see that over here if we preview. 0 and 0 and 0. Cool. But if we add songs later, they will be numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Cool. So we've done the template right there, but it doesn't look great. So what I'd like to do is add a bit of CSS. Now, I'm going to scope these styles. So I'm going to say scoped right here, so they don't apply to other components as well. And then inside that, I'm going to paste in a few styles. So first of all, the single, which is the div that surrounds the whole thing. We display as flex so that everything inside it, these 3 divs, sit next to each other. Okay? That's what flex does. We align the items to the center. This is vertically, not horizontally. And then the padding is 20 pixels. Border radius 10 pixels to soften the corners. The background is white. The margin is 16 pixels top and bottom. And the transition right here, this is because when we hover over it, we are adding a box shadow and a scale. So the transition between the box shadow and the transform, the scale, is going to be 0.2 seconds and ease. That's just so it's a smoother hover transition, that's all. Now, the thumbnail down here, that is the image right here. We say the max width is 100 pixels, max height 100 pixels, overflow is hidden, and the border radius is 10 pixels. So we just make the image a little bit smaller because the image inside has a max width of 150 pixels, or 150% rather, of this 100 pixels, and the same for the height, and we display as block. But obviously, any overflow of the image is hidden inside the thumbnail container. Now the info, we just give a bit of margin to the left and right, and the song number, we say margin left auto, that puts it way over to the right. So again, these are only styles, they don't really matter that much, it's just to make it look a bit better, and this is not a CSS course, so feel free to add your own styles if you prefer. But if we take a look, this now looks a lot better, and you can see the song number over on the right, and if we hover over, we can see it gets a little bigger, that's the scale, and we can also see the drop shadow as well, and it's a smooth transition because we have this transition property right here which says ease and do the transition over 0.2 seconds. So there we go, my friends, we've now created a list view component which takes in a playlist prop and it can cycle through those and output an item for each playlist in the playlists. Alright, so this is starting to take shape. What I'd like to do now is update the navigation to show the create playlist link, which is going to show us that form when we click it if they're logged in. So I'm only going to show that link in the top if they're logged in, and likewise I only want to allow users onto that page to create a new playlist if they're logged in. So we need to apply a route guard to that route as well. But let's start with the navigation. So let's go to the navbar component over here, and we want to output this if there is a user, and we're going to do it just before the logout button. So this is going to be a router-link like so, and it's going to go to the create playlist component. So let's data bind to and then set it equal to an object whereby the name property is going to be create playlist. So that was the name of the create route, and we can verify that inside the router file down here. That was the name. Okay, so that's going to direct us now to this component. We need to add in some text for this link. We'll just say create playlist like so. Okay, so if I save this now, we can see this link right here, create playlist. And if I click on that, it goes to this component. Now, like I said, I only want authenticated users, people logged in, to be able to view this page. So we need to add a route guard now, so that if we try to enter this page, we only let them in if they're logged in. So to do this, let's head on back to our route file over here, and at the top, this is where we'll create the route guards. Okay, so first of all, we need to import project auth from the Firebase config file because we're going to use that to determine the current user, if there is one or not. Then let's create the guard function. So I'm going to call this require auth and set it equal to a function. Remember, this function takes in 3 arguments: to, which is the route we're going to; from, which is where we've come from; and next, which is a function that we can fire to carry on or redirect. So first, let me find out the user. I'm going to say let user equal to project auth dot current user. So remember, this property gets us the current user. If they're logged in, then it's going to be that user object. If they're not, then it's going to be null. So then I want to check, do we have a user? Does that user exist? If we don't, I'm going to redirect them to login. If we do, then I'll just call next as normal and let them carry on to the page. So we'll say if, and then if we don't have a user, so exclamation mark user, then I want to redirect them. So we call next and pass in an object to say where we want to go to next. And the name of the component is going to be login like so. So if there's no user, when we try to enter the route, then it's going to redirect them to login. Else, if there is a user, we can just call next, and that lets them carry on as normal. So if they were going into the create playlist route and we call this, then it just goes to that route. It lets them get there. So now we can apply this to any route that we want to protect. Now, to begin with, that's just going to be this thing down here, create playlist. That's the only thing I want to protect at the minute. So what I'm going to do is say down here before enter and add in require auth like so. And in fact, we'll do it for the home component as well. So if they try to go to the home page to see the different playlists, I only want to allow them to do that if they're logged in. If they're not logged in, I want to redirect them to the login screen. So let's apply it here as well. We'll say before enter and it's require auth. All right, so let me save this now. And what I'm going to do is, in fact, I'm logged in. You see that? I'm logged in. Now, if I try to go to Muso Ninjas, it's fine because I'm logged in. If I try to go to create playlist, it's fine. I'm logged in. If I log out and try to go to Muso Ninjas, it doesn't let me. And if I try to go to /playlists/create, then it doesn't let me. It redirects me here. But there is still a problem, and it's the same problem that we had in the last project we created. So I'm going to log in here, mario@google.com, and test 1, 2, 3, 4. Log in, and we can go to Muso Ninjas, we can go to create playlist, that all works. However, if I try to refresh on one of these pages, then we get redirected to login. The same is true for create playlist. If I refresh here, I get redirected to login. And that's again because it takes Firebase a fraction of time to initialize to figure out that we're logged in. And by the time that this function runs, require auth, it's not figured out whether we're logged in or not yet. It's just null to begin with. So we need to wait for that small fraction of time for Firebase to kind of establish the connection with the backend and figure out whether we are logged in. And we did exactly this thing in the last project, the chat project. We're going to do the same thing now. We're going to go over to our main.js where we mount the application, but we only want to do this after Firebase has established that connection and detected some kind of authentication state change to determine whether we're logged in or if we're not. So what I do is surround this inside an onAuthStateChanged function. So to do this, we need to import project auth, and I'm going to do that at the top over here. Then down here, I'm going to say project auth and use the function onAuthStateChanged. So remember, this fires a function every time that Firebase detects a change in authentication. Now, it will fire initially when it first detects whether a user is logged in or logged out. So it's at this point we want to mount our application. So we're going to get this and place it inside over here. And that's when we want to mount the app. But we don't want to mount it and create it every time thereafter there is a change in authentication. We only want to do it for the first time there is a change, when it first detects that change. So what we do is we create that local variable app, and then down here we set that equal to this thing right here. So initially it's going to have no value. Then after the first initial change in authentication state, where it first detects whether we're logged in or not, then we assign it a value and we create the app. Thereafter, every time this function fires, if app already has a value, we don't need to do this. So we can just say if, and then in parentheses, not app. So if app doesn't currently have a value, then we create the app like so, and we mount it. So the first time this fires, app doesn't have a value. So this fires inside here, and it mounts the application to the DOM. Thereafter, if there's another auth state change, if they log in or log out, the function fires again, but this time we do have a value for app. And so therefore, this code block does not fire, so it doesn't remount it or anything like that, just the first time around. But now we've solved the problem of waiting for the app to initially mount until Firebase determines whether we're logged in initially or not. So now this should work. And if I go to Muso Ninjas now and refresh, then you can see it doesn't redirect me because we're waiting for that initial connection to figure out our authentication status. And the same is true for create playlist. If I refresh, we still stay on this page. If I log out though and try to go to the home page, we still can't get there. It still doesn't work. So now we have this navbar setup and this route guard setup to protect certain routes. Alright, so we can see all of these different playlists listed on the home page. Now, it would be nice if when we click on one of these, it takes us to a playlist details page. So we're going to start that process now by creating a playlist details route. But first of all, we need to create a playlist details component inside the playlist folder over here. So let's do that. We'll call this playlist details.vue. And then inside here, I'm just going to boilerplate it and say playlist details like so. Okay, so now we need to open up our route index file right here to create a route for this. I'm going to do that at the very bottom, and the path for this is going to be /playlists and then / the ID of whatever playlist we want to see. Now that is going to be a route parameter called ID. Now the next thing is the name, which will be playlist details. And then finally the components, which is also playlist details like so. Okay, so we need to import that up here. So I'm going to do that right here. Change create playlist to playlist details like so. Now I also want to apply the route guard to this thing right here, because I don't want anyone that's not logged in to land on this route and then be able to see this page, only logged in people. So let's apply this route guard by using before enter and require auth as well. Now finally, I'm going to set props to be true, and that's so we can accept any route parameters, remember, as props inside this component. So then, if I go to /playlists and then / some kind of ID, then we get the playlist details component. Now obviously this ID should be the ID of whatever item we click on right here. So now let's create a link for each of these things right here that goes to that route and passes in the ID for that playlist. So to do this, let's head on over to our list view components. And what we want to do is surround this entire div with the class of single with a router link, so that if they click anywhere on this thing over here, it will direct them to that playlist details page. So let's create that router link first up here, router-link, and then also the closing tag. I'm going to take the closing tag and paste it right at the bottom of the single div, and then scoot that single div in a little as well. Okay. So we need to bind to the to attribute, and that is going to be an object whereby we go to the playlist details component, right? But we also need to pass in the route parameter. And remember, to do that, we need to just add in another property called params, and that will be an object where we specify the route parameters. And the route parameter we have is called ID. So we make an ID property, and then we say this is the playlist dot ID. So the ID of that particular playlist we're currently cycling through. So now if we click on anywhere on one of these things, it should go to the playlist details components. And if we click on it, we can see it does, and we see the ID right up here as a route parameter. So if we let me refresh and click on this one down here, we see that ID. Now we need to capture that ID inside this playlist details component. So we first need to accept it as a prop. So we'll say props, and this is going to be ID. That's what it's called, the route parameter. And we can accept that because inside the object for this route right here, we say props true, which means we can accept route parameters as props. So if we go back to this component, we can now output the ID in the template just to make sure that this works. So I'm going to create an h2, and I'm going to say playlist details, and then I'll say ID, and then hyphen, and then we'll output the ID prop, which is the route parameter. So now we can see the ID right here. That works. If we go to a different one, we can see that ID, etc. So now what we need to do is flesh out this template based on this ID. Now, in order to do that, we need to make a request to Firebase, our Firestore database, to get that single document. So we'll see how to do that next. So we want to be able to flesh out the template of the playlist details component, but there's one more thing I'd like to do before we do that, and that is to redirect to that playlist details component after a user has created a new playlist. So to create the playlist, it saves the playlist and the image. Once it's done, we redirect to the playlist details component for that project, or rather for that playlist we just created. All right. So we need the ID essentially of that playlist we just created in order to redirect to this route for that playlist, because we passed that ID in as a route parameter. So let's go to the create playlist component first of all, and in order to do this we need a route instance. So let us import that. I'm going to import, and it's use router, because this is how we redirect someone, and that's going to be from Vue-router. Now where do we want to redirect them? Well, it's down here after they've uploaded the image and after we've added the document down here, only if there is no error. And we want to basically do that instead of this console log down here. So we can say router.push, and we want to go to the component with the name of playlist details. But remember, we need to pass in the route parameter for that playlist we've just created. So we'll say params, and inside here we need the ID property. Now how do we get the ID of the document that we've just created right here, because we don't seem to have access to it at the minute? Well, if we take a look at the use collection composable right here that we created, and we try to add in a new document, what we can do is actually get the result of that. So I could say const response is equal to this. And what this does is return to us a response object, and that response object has on it the ID of the document that was just created. So what I could do down here is return the response right here. So whenever we call this function, it returns that response object now, and on that is the ID. So over here inside create playlist, what I could do is say const response is equal to await add doc, and this add doc now returns this response object right here. So we have access to it over here as well. And like I said, on that there is an ID property, and we can pass in right here response.id, and that will be the ID of the document that we have just added. So after we've added the document, we then redirect them to playlist details, and we pass in the ID on the response object as a parameter, a route parameter. So hopefully this should work. I'm going to give this a whirl, go to create playlist. I'm going to refresh just to catch any changes and to be sure I've got those. Then playlist details, or playlist title to begin with, we'll say chill out classics, and we'll say some chilled out songs, ... Spell this correctly. Let's choose a file. I'm going to go with Palm for this, and then create that. Hopefully now it's going to redirect us after this has done. It's not done, so let's see what's going on. We must have an error. So router is not defined. Okay, so we haven't actually used this function, so let's do that. We need to create the router instance so that we can use the router down here. So let me say up here const router is equal to use router. In order to use this, we have to try this again now. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to refresh, and then I'll call this chilled out vibes this time, and then we'll say some chilled out songs ... Choose a file again. We'll go with Palm and create this, and now hopefully it will redirect us, and it does, and we see the ID of the document we've just added. Now if I go to the home page, hopefully I'll see all those new playlists right here, but this thing right here I need to delete, because when we created the second one we uploaded the same image and that kind of overridden the first one, so that URL for that image is no longer valid. So I'm going to go to the Firestore and delete that one, which was called, let me see, chill out classics. Let me look for that. So chill out vibes, not that one, beach tunes, road trip, this one right here I'm going to delete by clicking over here and delete document, start delete, and then it's gone from here as well. But now we created that and we saw that the redirect works, so that when we create a new playlist, now we're redirecting to the playlist details for that particular playlist. Alright, so now we're listing these different playlists, and we can click on each one and it shows us the playlist details page with the ID. Now what I'd like to do is, when we land on this page, actually get that document from the database so we can show the details right here. And the way we're going to do this is by using a real-time listener. So much like we can listen to a collection like we did over here inside get collection, we can do the same thing with documents. So we can set up a real-time listener much in the same way as this thing right here, using the onSnapshot method, but it's going to be listening to just one single document, and it will retrieve that document, and then whenever there's a change in the document, we get that snapshot back, much like we do from a change in the collection. So we're going to do something very similar to this, but instead of get collection, we can call our composable get document, for example. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new composable, and I'm going to call this get document.js. And by the way, we could make it so that we just do a single fetch to get the data and we don't have real-time data. But the problem with that is if we edit the data later on, if we're on the details page and we add a song, then we're not going to get that update instantly reflected in the page because we don't have that real-time listener grabbing that updated snapshot. We're just fetching the data once when the page first loads or when the component first loads. So that's why I'm setting up a real-time listener. So then, a lot of this is going to be very similar to get collection, which is why I'm going to copy all of this and I'm going to paste it inside get document. Now, I'm going to change a few things. So I'm going to change this to get document. And then down here, we need to export get document. Now, I also want to change this right here from documents to document, and also when we return it down here. And then I'd like to also take in, as well as the collection, the ID of the document that we want. So when we call this, we're going to say what collection this document is in, and also the ID of the document. We need that to set up a real-time listener to that document. Okay, so now we need our document ref. So not collection ref, document ref. And this is equal to project firestore.collection to go into the collection. That's still the same. But then we don't need order by right here because there's only one document and we're not ordering any documents by anything. We're just getting that one single document. But what we do need to do is get a reference to a specific document, not just the collection. So on the end of here, we type out doc to get a single document, and we pass in the ID to get a reference to that single document. So that's this thing right here. So that's the reference right here, document ref. Now this on snapshot is the same, but now it's applied to the document ref instead of the collection ref. So all we're doing is setting up a real-time listener to this single document right here. And every time there's a change to that, we get a snapshot back. And also initially as well, when we first set up the real-time listener to this document, we get back an initial snapshot to tell us what the document looks like at that moment in time. Now, instead of snap, I'm going to call this doc because that's basically what we're getting back, the document, every time there's a change. Now, we don't need this stuff right here because we're not cycling through documents. There's only one of them, and we don't need this array results. So let's get rid of that. And instead, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that that document actually exists, because it might be that we go to some kind of random URL with a random ID that doesn't exist, right? And if we try to request that, then it's going to fail. So we need to check, does this document with this ID actually exist? And the way we do that is by saying if, and then doc, which is what we get back right here, dot data, like so. So if that document has data, then it obviously exists. And in that case, we can do something with that data. Okay, so what I want to do is update this thing right here. So I'm going to say document.value is equal to an object whereby inside we use spread syntax to get all of the doc.data. So that takes all of the different properties inside our document. So for example, all of these, and it spreads them out into this new object. And the reason I'm doing that is because we also need another property inside this, which is going to be the ID, and that's attached to this doc that we get back right here. So we can just say doc.id, like so. And now we have an object for this thing. So this comes back initially, like I said, when we first set up the real-time listener. So we get that document initially, and then every time there's a change in the data in that document, we get the updated value back, this updated doc, and we update the document value right here to match those changes and all of the data inside that document. I hope that makes sense. So we update the document value right here, so we don't need to do this one. And also we need to set the error value to be null if it has data, like so. Now, if it doesn't have data, then we do need an error. So in that case, I'm going to add an else clause right here, and I'll say error.value is equal to that document does not exist. So if there is no data on a document, it basically means, well, the document doesn't exist, and therefore we update the error value to say that, okay? Now then, we still have a second callback right here, error, to this onSnapshot method right here. So that's this thing, and all we're going to do is log that to the console, and we're going to set the error value to be could not fetch documents, or something like that. It doesn't really matter. Okay then, so now we have that. The real-time listener is all set up for that document. Now, scrolling down, we have this watch effect, which we're still going to keep because this function, remember, on invalidate will run when the component unmounts. So if I'm on a details page and I go away from that, then I don't want to have that real-time listener still set up, because if we do that for every time we go to the details page, it's going to stack up all the real-time listeners, and that's not going to be very good for performance and cost. So we then have to unsubscribe using this function, which is returned to us right here when we set up the onSnapshot. So that's what we do inside this onInvalidate function. This unsubscribes us from the real-time listener right here, so we keep that in. And then finally, we're returning these things which we need to do, and we're exporting get document. So that is all done now. So now we can use this get document composable inside our playlist details component to output that data. And then when there's a change in that data, it will automatically update in the template. So we'll do that next. So now we have our get document composable. Let's use it in our playlist details component. So first of all, we need to import it. So import get document from, and we'll say at to go to the source right here, then / into composables, and then / we want the get document file. Okay, so now we can use it inside the setup function. So we want to use this get document function. So let's say const, and remember we get certain values back. We get these things right here, error and document. So let's copy those and paste them inside here. Set that equal to get document like so. Now remember, we have to pass through two things here, the collection, which is playlists, and also the ID. Now we have the ID as a prop, but remember, in order to use it inside the setup function, we need to take in the props right here, and then we say props.id. Okay, so that's fine. Now we just need to return these things right here. So let's copy that and say down here return, paste this in, and now we can use both of these inside the template. Cool. So I'm going to delete this h2 first, and the first thing I'll do is output the error if there is one. So div.error, and then output the error right here, and I'll apply viv to this. So viv equals error like so. So if there is an error, then we're going to output it right here. Now, the next thing I want to do is check if we have a value for the playlist. Now, remember, to begin with, it's going to be null because that's the initial value. But once we've fetched it, it will become the documents. So we'll do another div right here, and I'm going to give this a class of playlist hyphen details, just so we can style this in a second. Now, I also want to apply a viv to this, and I'm going to set that equal to document. So if we have the document, then we output it. Until then, we don't. So inside here, I'm going to do first of all the playlist information. So a comment to say playlist information right here. Okay, so let's do a div with a class of playlist hyphen info. All right, and inside this, I want to display the cover image, I also want to display the title, who it was created by, so their username and the description, and all of this stuff is going to sit on the left over here. Eventually the song list will sit on the right. So let's do these things. First of all, the cover image. So div.cover, so we can style it later on. And then inside we need an image tag whereby the source is coming from the document. So we're going to bind, data bind, so a colon, and then we get the documents, and then we want the cover URL property. That's all we need to do. So we can get rid of alt. You can give this a value if you wish. So hopefully that will show the image now of this particular playlist. If I refresh, yep, we could see it there. Okay, so it's loading that image. All right then, so next, after the cover image, we want the title. So let's do an h2, and inside here we'll output the document.title, just like that. After that, we want the username, so paragraph tag, and we'll say created by, and we'll say playlist.username. All right, let's give this a class as well so we can style it. So class is equal to username. And then finally, a paragraph tag for the description. So let's do that. So p.description to give this a class, again to style it in a moment, and then output the playlist, or rather not playlist, the documents.description. Like so. Okay then. So right here, this to me doesn't make much sense. Document, because at the end of the day, it's a playlist, right? So what I'd like to do is call this something else inside this file. Now I can do that when I'm grabbing stuff or destructuring stuff like this. All we need to do is do a colon after document and then whatever we want to call it. So for example, playlist. So what this is saying right here is, okay, grab the document object from getDocuments, but I want you to call it playlist. So now we can refer to it as playlist instead of document. So we would return playlist, which still is the document, and then in all of the different instances right here, we would call it playlist and not document. So playlist, like so. And we already did that one right here. So that makes a bit more sense to me. Okay then, so now we've output that data, let's take a little look at this. So we have the title, we have the username, and we have the description and the cover image as well. So this is all going to sit on the left. The song list is going to later sit on the right, but let's just create the div for that right now. So let's do a comment first of all to say song list. And by the way, to get those comments, you just press control and /, control /, and it takes it from a non-comment to a comment and vice versa. Just a little shortcut in VS Code. Alright, so let's do a div with a class of song-list, and then inside here for now we'll just do a paragraph to say song list here. Okay, so we'll update this later on, but eventually this thing, song list here, is going to sit on the right. So that's cool. We've output the data that we need right now, but it still looks terrible, so we need to style this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste chunks of CSS from my repo, which remember you can find, and the link is in one of the first lessons of this course where we talk about course files. You need to select the lesson 156 drop down right here and search for the playlist details view components. So down here, I'm just going to copy a little bit at a time like this and paste it in, and we'll explain them as we go. So let's paste these in first of all and save it. So what we have here is the playlist details. That's the div that surrounds the whole thing. So it's this div right here. And what we're saying is display this as grid. Now, I don't think we've used grid yet in this course. If you want to learn about it, I've got a whole playlist on my YouTube channel for free. So definitely check out my YouTube channel for that if you want to learn more. But what this does is allow us to display our content in a grid on the page. And what we're doing here is saying the template columns is one fraction on the left and two fractions on the right. So essentially we're splitting the screen up into 3 columns, and we're saying give the content on the left 1 column and the content on the right 2 columns. Now by default we have this here and this here. This will be given 1 column on the left for 1 fraction, and this will be given 2 columns on the right, 2 fractions. That's what this means. And then the gap between those columns is just 80 pixels. Now the cover right here, we say overflow hidden, border radius 20 pixels to soften the corners, position relative, and padding 160 pixels. So that is for the image right here. So if I save it so far and take a look, okay, still looks a bit strange. We have the grid, but it still doesn't look great. So let's carry on with this CSS. So I'm going to copy and paste in another couple of styles. So we have the image now inside the cover, display block, position absolute, top and left 0, and then the min width 100% and height, then the max width 200% and the height as well. So it could be twice as big as the cover itself, but don't forget we say overflow hidden, so if it does go off the cover then it won't show on the screen. Now the playlist info, which is this stuff right here, the playlist info, we say text align to the center. So if I save this, and this is starting to take shape now, so it's looking a bit better. So let me get the last few little styles and paste these in, like so. So we have the H2 inside the playlist info, that's the title. We capitalize it, increase the font size, and give it a margin top. The paragraph tags, we say margin bottom 20 pixels. The username, we give a color of this kind of medium gray, and the description we align to the left instead of center. So if we save this now, that looks a lot better. And eventually, like I said, we're going to have a full song list here on the right. So let's try this out with a few different playlists. Yep, looks good. And let's try this one. Cool. So they're all starting to look a bit better now. Now, when we first saw a preview of this project at the start of the chapter, we saw that we could delete the playlist if we owned the playlist. And in order to do that, we need to check, does the current user who is logged in have ownership of this particular playlist? And we'll take a look at how to do that next. Alright, so now what I'd like to do is place a button at the bottom over here to say delete, and a user can delete the playlist, but I only want to show that if the user owns this playlist, and by that I mean, did they create it? So it says created by Mario, so if I'm logged in as Mario, then I should see that button. If I'm not, if I'm logged in as Luigi, for example, I shouldn't see that because I don't want to allow users to delete other people's playlists, only their own. So we need to figure out the current user and then compare it against the user that created the playlist. If they match, then we can say, yep, the user has ownership of this playlist, therefore we'll show the button. If they don't match, then they don't have ownership, and so we don't show the button. So let's first of all come to the playlist details, and I want to use the composable get user so we can get the current user and the ID of that user. And what we're going to do is compare it against the ID, the user ID of the playlist. Remember, if we take a look inside these playlist documents, we had this user ID, so that was the user that created it. So we're going to compare that against the user who is currently logged in, which we can get from this composable get user. So let's import get user. Import get user from, and it's at /composables /get user. All right, so this needs to be in a string, so make sure you have those quotations. And then down here, let's get the current user below this one. So const user is equal to get user like so. All right then, so how do we work out this ownership, and what kind of property is this ownership going to be? Well, what I'm going to do is make a computed property to figure this out, because the values like this user right here are going to change. They might log in, they might log out, so we need a computed property to update dependent on that as well. So what I'm going to do is down here create this by saying const ownership, if we can spell it correctly, ownership is equal to a computed property. So press enter on that to auto import it right here. And this runs a function, remember, inside to return a value. Now I want to return either true or false. So if it's true, it means they have ownership. If it's false, it means they don't. So I'm going to return something, and it's going to be a statement which checks 3 different things. First of all, I want to check that this playlist actually has a value, because this is also going to change over time. Remember, when we first load the component on the page, we won't have that playlist yet. It will be null to begin with until we've retrieved it from the Firestore database. So I only want to try and figure this out once we have a value for the playlist. So that must be the first condition. So playlist.value. So if this has a value right here, then it will be truthy and it will pass this test. If it doesn't have a value, then it's going to be false, and automatically this now is going to return false, because we can't say that they own something when we don't even have that playlist yet. So that's the first condition. Then we'll use logical AND, because we have to pass all three of these conditions in order for ownership to be true. Now, the second condition is that we have a user value. So user.value, because again, if this is null, then there's no point in us trying to figure out if that user has ownership of something, because we don't know the user. So user must also have a value. Now, the third condition is that the user ID is going to be equal to the user ID on the playlist. So we'll say user.value.uid, that's how we get the current user's ID, and check if that is equal to the playlist that we have right here. And then we want to get the value of that, so .value, and the property was called user ID with a capital I. That's this property right here. So we're checking all three conditions, and all three of them have to be true in order for us to return true overall and ownership to be true. If any one of these is false, then ownership is going to be false. It's only true if they're all true right here. Now, if they are all true, then that means that, yeah, the current user logged in owns the playlist that's being shown on the page. So let's return this ownership computed property down here, and we can use it then inside our template to dynamically show different things. Now, all I want to do at the minute is show a delete playlist button if ownership is true. So let's create that button underneath the description. So button like so, and inside we'll say delete playlist like so, and I want to attach a v-if to this, and that's going to be equal to ownership. So only if ownership is true will a user see this, if they own the playlist. So let's save that. I'm going to now refresh over here, and we can see delete playlist. It's not going to do anything at the minute because we've not hooked up any functionality, but we see it. Now, if I go back to the home page, do we have any playlists created by someone else? No, we don't. So we're going to have to log out, and let me check if I have any other users by going to authentication. No, I don't. So I'm going to have to sign up. Now, we'll do Luigi, and the email will be luigi@google.com, password test1234, and sign up. So once we've signed up, we can go to Muso Ninjas. Now I can see all these playlists, but if I click on one of them, because I don't own them, I'm not going to see that delete button, because this statement right here is not going to be true. The current user logged in does not have the same ID or user ID as this property on the playlist, because that was by another user, by Mario. And now I'm logged in as Luigi. All right, so that's good. Now we're allowed to show this button only if they own the playlist. And let me create another playlist just to demonstrate this. I'm going to call this backpacking music, and then I'll just say music to travel to ... Not great descriptions and all that. And then over here we'll choose the travel image. I'm going to save that. Should redirect us then to this new playlist right here, and now I can see delete playlist because I own this, right? Others, like this one, I don't see it, but I can see delete on the ones that I own, which is pretty good, right? Cool. So next up, we'll actually try to delete a playlist by clicking on this button. Alright then, so now we have this delete button down here. Let's hook it up so that it actually deletes the playlist from our Firestore database. Now we're going to place the logic for this inside one of our composables. And you might, to begin with, think, well, let's put it in use collection because we have this add doc right here. Why not place a delete doc as well? But we're not going to do that because adding a document is kind of doing something to the collection. We're adding something to the collection. When we delete a document, we're doing something to the document, right? I suppose you could put it in here, but I don't want to do that. I want to create another composable called use documents. So anything we do to a document, like edit it in the future, or maybe delete it, then we put inside that. And to me, that makes a bit more sense because we're doing something to the documents. Now, we wouldn't put add doc in that composable. That doesn't make sense because, like I said, that's something we're doing to the collection. We're changing the collection, right? So what I'm going to do is create a new composable called useDocument.js because we don't have this yet. We have getDocument, but we don't have useDocument. And this is going to be for editing documents in the future and also deleting them. Now, like I said, if you wanted to, you could probably put delete doc inside this composable. It's just that I'm choosing to put it inside this one. That makes more sense to me, but there's no hard, fast rule. So let's create this composable. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just import a couple of things at the top. So we need ref to have ref values and also project Firestore. Now let's create the composable function. So const use documents is equal to a function, and we need to return, or rather export this at the end. So export default use document like so. Okay, so what refs do we need? Well, I'm going to create an error ref, which is going to start off as null. I'm also going to create an is pending ref, which is going to be true when we're trying to do something like edit or delete the document, and then false to begin with, and also once the action is complete. So that's going to be a ref, and to begin with will be false. And then I think that's it. So let's also return those two values at the end. Return, and inside the object, error, and is pending. Okay, cool. Now, the next thing I want to do is take in two arguments. The first argument is going to be the collection in which we want to delete a document, and then the ID of the document we want to delete, or in the future it might be edit as well. So let's create the function now to delete a document. So const delete doc is equal to an async function because we're going to perform an async action inside this. And then what I'd like to do is first set is pending dot value to be true because we're starting to do something, and also we'll reset the error just in case there is one to null. So error.value is equal to null. Okay, then after that we're going to try to do something and then catch any errors if there are any. Now, the thing we're going to try is to delete the doc, but before we do that we need a document reference. Now, we could create that inside this delete doc function right here, but I'm not going to do that because we might use this document reference inside another function later on for editing the document as well. So I'll create it outside of the function right here. So I'm going to say const, in fact not const because we might change it inside one of the functions, let doc ref, and by the way, these should probably be constants, not lets, because the refs in themselves are not going to change. The value changes, remember, but not the actual ref object. So they can be constants. This one is going to be let, just in case I change the reference inside one of the functions later on. So we'll call it docref and set it equal to project Firestore dot collection to go into a collection, and we pass in the collection, which is this argument right here. Then we need a reference to a specific doc, and to do that we say .doc and pass in the ID. So we have that document reference. Now to delete something, all we need to do is say docref, like so, dot delete. And that goes out and deletes it from Firebase. Now it's asynchronous, so let's place a wait in front of it. And what I'm going to do is just store the response in case we want it at any point, and also we'll return the response as well at the end. Okay? Now all of this, by the way, needs to go inside the try block, so let me delete it from there and paste it inside the try block right here, because this is what we're trying to do. I also, after this, want to set is pending back to false, so I'll copy that, paste it here, and change this to false because the action is done now. Now, if there's an error, I'm going to log that to the console. So console.log and then the error.message so I can see what it is. And then also we say is pending.value and set that equal to false because, yeah, there's an error, but the action is still complete. We're not trying to still do it. We're just outputting the error. And then let's update the error value to be could not delete the document. So could not delete the document. And by the way, you can make your error messages something different if you wish. You don't have to do exactly the same as me. I'm just making some quick error messages so that we know what's going on. All right, so let's also return this delete doc function at the end, like so. And I think that is pretty much everything we need to do right here. So now inside the playlist details component, we can import this composable and use it to delete a playlist. So first of all, let's import it at the top. I'm going to do it right at the top, import, use document, and that is going to be from, and we'll say @/composables. And then we want use document. Okay, so down here inside setup, we can grab that. So let me do it at the bottom. Const, and we just want the delete doc function for now. I'm going to set that equal to use document. And remember, we pass in a collection, which is playlists, and then the ID of the document we want to delete, which we get on the props. So we can say props.id. Remember, we have to say props right here to access that. Okay, so we have that. Now what I'd like to do is run this function when a user clicks on this button. So we need to attach a click event to this, so @click, and set it equal to handle delete, like so. So let's create this function, handle delete, down in here. I'll do that underneath ownership. So we'll say const handle delete is equal to an async function, because we'll be using an asynchronous task inside it. And then all we need to do is await and then call this function delete doc, like so. We don't need to pass anything inside this because we've already passed in the ID and the collection to use document. So it knows what document it wants to delete. We're just running that function. Where is it? Inside use document. We're running this function right here to delete that document. That's all there is to it. So if I now return this handle delete at the bottom, handle delete, and save it, then when I click this button now, hopefully it should delete that document from the database. So let's go to Cloud Firestore and let's go back to the home page. Now I'm going to click on one of these. Let's just do this top one because it's pretty meaningless at the minute. The title's rubbish. And by the way, we have to be logged in as Mario. So I'm going to log out and log back in as Mario at google.com and then test 1, 2, 3, 4. Log in. And then hopefully now, if I go to the homepage, I can delete this one. Yep. Click on this, delete playlist, and notice this right here. That document does not exist. So now we've deleted it. It says that document doesn't exist anymore. And if we go over here, hopefully we don't see that document in here anymore. So if we check out all the titles, we don't get the weird one. It's been deleted. And if we go back to the homepage, then we can see it's no longer here. So this has worked. But it's not yet deleted the item or the image from storage. So whenever we delete a document, I also want to delete that image associated with that document from the storage. So we'll look at how to do that in the next lesson. So we saw in the last lesson that if we deleted the playlist, it worked in the sense that we deleted that playlist from the Firestore database, but it didn't delete the image for that playlist. So that's still being stored inside Firebase storage. Now, the image in question that we tried to delete was this night.png one. Well, we didn't try to delete it. We just deleted the Firestore document, which contained the URL to this night.png image. But we also want to delete that image as well, because if we delete a playlist, we want to delete the document in the database and the image associated with that playlist. Now, since we didn't do that, we're going to manually delete this for now. And then we're left with the 4 images for the 4 remaining playlists. So now we need to figure out how to delete the image when we delete a playlist as well. So to do this, we're going to begin by going to our use storage composable, and we're going to create a function here to delete an image. So much like we have an upload image function, we're going to also create one to delete an image. So let's create that const and delete image like so. We set it equal to an async function, and then inside is where we want to delete the image. Now we're also going to return it at the end, so delete image, so that we can use it in our component. Alright, so we need to pass into this function a path, and that is the path to the image that we want to delete. Now we'll see where that comes from later on, but just assume that we have the path for now and we want to delete it. Well, first of all, let's create a storage ref. Remember, in order to do anything with Firebase storage, we have to get a reference to a specific thing in storage. We did that before when we wanted to add a file, and we're going to do the same thing now when we want to delete a file. So let me create a const, and we'll call this storage ref again and set it equal to the reference. Now it doesn't matter that we have a constant name the same thing here, because they're both inside functions, so they're local to those functions. So I'm going to set this equal to project storage dot ref, and then remember we pass in a path here. So we have that path, we can just pass it in. So that path will represent the path to the file that we're trying to delete, and now we have a reference to this. Okay, so next we want to try and delete this. So let's do a try and catch block. Catch the error if there is one, and we'll log out the error if there is one. So error.message, and also we'll update the error ref value by saying error.value is equal to error.message. Okay, so now let's try to delete it. So we take our storage ref like so, and we say dot, and we use a method called delete, and that's all there is to it. So we invoke this method, and that's going to try to delete this image at this ref. Now this is asynchronous, so we can await this right here, and that's all there is to it. So now we can go ahead and use this delete image function inside our playlist details component. So we want to do this inside handle delete, but first of all we need to get that function, this one right here, delete image, from this composable. So let's import the composable first of all, and it's use storage that we need. So import use storage from, and it's at /composables /use storage like so. Okay, so now we can use that down here. I'm going to say const, and we want the delete image function, and that comes from use storage. Okay, so then now we can use this function down at the bottom. So let's do that. I'm going to inside here, after we've deleted the document, I'm going to await and then delete image. Now remember, we have to pass in the image path, the path to that image inside storage. So how do we get that? Well, remember, it's on our playlist object right here. So all we need to do is pass that in to this function. So I'm going to say playlist, and then dot value, and then dot file path, like so. So I'm going to actually take this and place it first. So first of all, we delete the image, and then we delete the document, okay? Now, after that, I want to redirect the user back to the home page. We've deleted the image, we've deleted the document, now redirect them. So in order to do that, we need to import use router. So let's do that. Import use router from Vue-router. And then down here, we can use that. So const router is equal to use router, invoke it. And now we can use that to redirect the user at the bottom after we've deleted the image and the document. So router, and then we use the push method to push on a new route. And this is going to be to the home page. So the name of that is home. And that's all there is to it. So now we delete the image, we delete the document, and when it's done, we redirect them to the home page. So let's give this a whirl. I'm going to refresh, and then I'm going to click on one of these. Let's click on Chilled Out Vibes. And I'm going to delete the playlist. So delete, and then it redirects us to the home page, and we no longer see that. Let's make sure it also deleted the image. So we see 4 at the minute. Refresh, and hopefully we'll see 3 now. And we do. So it deleted the image as well. So now we're done. We've cleaned up. We've deleted the Firestore document and the image associated with that Firestore document. Okay then, so now we're making a bit of progress, but I just want to take a quick sidestep and turn our attention now to Firestore rules again. Because at the minute, anyone can potentially delete anyone's data. Now, the only thing stopping it is that we have a viv attached to the button, so we only show that button for people who own the playlist. But that's not really fully secure in itself, and the actual data rules say that anyone can read and write to any document. Look, allow read and write if they make the request before a certain time. Now, I want to secure our data in 2 different ways. First of all, I only want read access to any document for any authenticated user. So anyone who's logged in can read all of the data, all of the playlists, and we need that access so that we can see them all on the screen. We're reading that data, fetching it. So any logged in user should be able to see that. Now, secondly, I want to only allow users who own a playlist to be able to delete it. So even if for some reason a user manages to circumnavigate this thing right here and still make a request to delete someone else's playlist from the browser, in that case, our Firestore rules should block that request. So unless the user owns that resource, they should not be able to edit or delete it. So let's try making now these Firestore rules. So open up this file, firestore.rules. This is where we're going to create those rules for our database. So the first thing I want to do here is change this match statement right here, just so we're matching documents inside the playlist collection. So we've seen how to do this. Instead of this wildcard saying match any document inside the entire database, I'm going to say match any request to playlists and then a wildcard, but we're not going to use the double asterisk wildcard. We're going to use the wildcard doc ID. Now it can be called what you want, but what this does now, if we don't use the double asterisk, is capture the ID of the document inside a variable now called doc ID, which we can use down here. So this is saying match any document inside the playlist collection, but we're just capturing the ID. So we want to get rid of this thing right here. We don't want it to be anything to do with the time. And I'm going to say allow read, but also allow create, because users should be able to create new playlists if they're logged in as well. So allow read and create if they're logged in. So remember, we get access to the request object, and on that is auth. So we'll allow this if the auth property is not equal to null. If it's not equal to null, it means they're logged in. So if they're logged in, if auth is not equal to null, we allow that user to read access, and that's so they can read all the data and see all the data, and also to create new items in the playlist collection. So when they go to create a new playlist, they're allowed to do that as well. So that rule allows only logged in people to do this. Okay, so we need also another rule, and this is going to be for deleting documents and also editing or updating documents. So we can come to the next line and do another rule for the same collection. So I could say allow, and then this time it's going to be delete and also update. So self-explanatory, this is to delete a document when we click on a button. So if we see one of these playlists, when we click on that, it sends a delete request to delete a document. Now that's what this is. Update is if we change the document in the future, which we will do later on, but we only want to do this if a certain condition is met. Now again, what we're going to do is say request.auth, but now we're not saying that we just need to be logged in. We need to say that the user owns this document. Now on the auth, we can access the UID property. So that's the ID of the user making this request. And we can check, is it equal, so double equals, to the resource .data .user ID. So this right here, this resource represents the resource we're trying to either delete or update, so the documents. And then this right here represents the data on that document. And remember, we have a user ID property on that data. Let's take a look. If we go to Cloud Firestore and choose a document, then we should see the user ID right here. So we're accessing that property on the resource data. And we're saying, does that match the ID of the user who is making the request? If it does, then this is true. And therefore we allow them to delete it. We allow them to update it. But if it doesn't match, so if some other user is trying to make a request to delete someone else's playlist, then this is going to be false. And so therefore, on the server, Firebase is going to say, no, actually, you cannot delete it. You cannot update it. So this protects the data a little bit from other users. So now only users who own that particular document, who created it, can therefore delete it. I hope that makes sense. So now I'm going to save this and I'm going to deploy the rules. So let me open up a new tab and I'm going to say Firebase deploy and then / only, and we want Firestore : rules, and that only deploys the Firestore rules then, because we don't need to deploy any website, just the rules to protect our data. Okay, so that's done. Let's go over here. I'm going to refresh and then I'm going to go to the rules tab right here to check that that is updated, and we can see it has. It matches what we have locally. So now to test this, let us go to the playlist details page. So if we go to views, playlists, playlist details, where we output the button, let's take away the v-if. So we're saying right here that people that are not owning the playlist can still see that delete button and potentially send that request. But now we have our new rules, it should be refused on the Firebase end. So let's try this out. What I'm going to do is log out and log in as Luigi. So Luigi at google.com and then test1234. So log in. Then we'll go to the homepage and we'll choose one of these by Mario. And if I refresh, then we can see delete playlist, because now we're not only showing that if they own it, because we took off that v-if. But if I try to delete it, it should refuse us. I'm opening this in case we get some kind of error. So let's try to delete this. And it says right here, missing or insufficient permissions, and it just redirects us to the homepage. However, it did delete the image. So even though we protected the document, we didn't protect the image, because remember down here, we also delete the image. So we also have a file to protect that as well, and that's down here, storage.rules. So we'll take a look at those next. So we saw in the last lesson that if we try to delete a playlist and we don't own that, then it doesn't let us do that. We can't delete that Firestore document, because now we've updated our Firestore rules. If we take a look at this to say no, only allow someone to delete it if they own that document. Now, it didn't, however, protect this image right here. So it still deleted the image, because inside playlist details, we delete the image as well. So we need to add some rules to our storage over here to only allow people who own a particular image to delete it. So they're very similar to Firestore rules in that we have paths like this. Now this right here is just saying the service and then accessing the bucket, much like we access over here the database right here. So we don't need to change those two things. This is going to be a path. Now at the minute it's matching all paths, so any image or any document stored inside storage. Now we want to make this so that instead of all paths, it's just a specific path. So what I'm going to do is change this to /covers, because remember that is the initial folder inside storage. If we take a look at that, it's covers, and if we go in there, we have the user ID, so we need to do that folder, and then we have the file names. So what we need to do is say /covers to go into that folder, then into another folder, which is the user ID. Now this is going to be a wildcard because it could be any ID, and we'll capture that. So we'll say right here, user ID. Now you can call that wildcard whatever you want, and what it does is capture the name of the folder. So the user ID, whatever folder we're trying to get into when we make the request, it captures that and we can use it inside the rules later on. And then this right here, all paths, means basically anything from that point onwards. Now I'm just going to change this to documents because that's where our document is. It doesn't really matter. You can call it all paths if you wish, but this is where our document is being stored now inside the user folder. So we're matching all requests to this path now inside covers, then a user folder, doesn't matter what it is, but this captures that user ID when we make the request, and then any document inside it. Okay, so first of all, I want everyone who's logged in to be able to read and also create, because they read them on the home page right here and also on the details page, but they need to be able to create new images right here when we upload the image. So we want allow read and create, not write. And by the way, write means create, edit all in one. So, or create and update all in one. We don't want to allow them to update just if auth is not equal to null. So this is saying only if they're logged in can they read and create. So that's fine. The next thing I want to do is allow users to delete them only if the person trying to delete it, the person logged in, if their UID is equal to this UID right here, whatever folder we're going into, because if they match, it means they're trying to delete one of their own images. If it doesn't match, it means they're trying to delete someone else's. Does that make sense? So let's do that. Down here, we'll say allow, and then this time delete, and that is going to be if, and again, we get the request object .auth, and we get the UID of the user logged in, and we'll only allow this if that equals to this user ID, which we capture. And remember, I said we can use it down here inside the rules. So this user ID is going to be whatever folder we're going into. So for example, say I make a request to delete an image inside this folder. We will capture the name of this folder, which we've called user ID inside this wildcard. So therefore we're using it right here and we're saying, does that name of the folder, user ID, match the user ID of the person logged in? If they do match, this is going to be true and we can allow that user to delete it. If they don't match, it's going to be false, and therefore we're not going to allow the user to delete it. So this now protects the images from people that don't technically own the images, who uploaded them. So let's save this now. And now let's deploy this. I'm going to say Firebase deploy, and then only, and then it's storage rules, like so, to deploy the storage rules file. Okay, and now that's done, let's head over here to check this. I'm going to go to rules, and we might need to refresh to see this, but let's take a look. No, it's done it for us. It's all updated. So before I do anything else, what I'm going to do is delete the document associated with that beach image, beach tunes, because we no longer have the image for this. I want to delete the document as well. So let's go and do that inside the Cloud Firestore. We'll find that. It's called beach tunes. So let's take a look. Yep, this one, beach tunes. I'm going to delete that document so it no longer appears over here. All right then. So now, if we try to do this, I'm going to go to a road trip. This was created by Mario, but I'm currently logged in as Luigi. I'm going to try to delete this. And if I open up the console as well, we should see that we get an error. I'm going to just refresh right here, like so. Okay, I'm going to delete the playlist, and now we can see missing or insufficient permissions, and it's not deleted the image now. It's not allowed us to do that on the server. Because of these storage rules we have just uploaded right here. I was logged in as Luigi and I tried to delete Mario's picture and it didn't let me. And the same is true for the Firestore document. So now we're protecting our images and we're protecting our documents from other users. Okay, so that's much better. Now finally, I just want to only show this again if you currently own the playlist. So let's go back to playlist details. And where we have that button, only show this if ownership is true. So viv is equal to ownership, like so. Save it, and now I can't see that button. But I know that even if people circumnavigate that now and they see the button, they still can't delete other people's data. Okay, so now we can start to work on the song list over here for each playlist. Now, if I go to a playlist and I own that playlist, I should be able to add new songs on this page, and there should be a form showing at the bottom for me to do that, only if I own this playlist. If I don't, then I don't see that. So let's start by creating a component which is going to contain this form to add a new song, and then we'll embed it inside the playlist details component. So let us first of all create this new file. I'm going to call this add song and place it inside the components folder. So new file, add song.vue, and then inside here we'll just boilerplate this. So view, and then inside the template we'll just say add song form here. Okay, so let me now nest this inside the playlist details. So we're going to place this right here underneath the song list. So we want to use the add song component right here. Now we need to import that in order to use it. So let's do it down here. We'll do it at the top, in fact. Import add song, and that's going to be from @/components / add song.vue. Okay, we also need to register them down here, the components that we use. So we'll say components, that's an object, and we want add song. All right, so don't forget your comment at the end as well. So now we're placing this add song component right here. So that is going to contain the form. But again, I only want to show this if the user is logged in and they are owning this song. So we can apply a viv to this, viv, and set it equal to ownership. So now if they own it, then they see this component right here. Now notice I don't see it because I'm not logged in as Mario, but if I go to the home screen and then click on this one, I can see it right here, and I can see delete because I am logged in as Luigi. Okay? So then, inside this add song component, I'm going to pass in the playlist as a prop because we're going to edit the playlist ultimately inside this component. And by edit, I mean we're adding songs to it. So if we take a look at the database, go to Cloud Firestore. For each document, we have this songs array right here. That's what we're going to be editing. So we're editing this file, this playlist document. So I want to pass that playlist document as a prop into the component right here. So let's do that. We're going to data bind, and we're going to call this prop playlist and set it equal to playlist, which is the playlist document we have right here. We get access to it because we returned it down here. Okay, so now we can start to flesh out this add song component. So to begin with, let's get rid of this and replace it with a div, and I'm going to give this a class of add song so we can style it later on. Now inside that div, I'm going to do a form, and we can get rid of the action right here. We don't need that. And inside the form, I want two different inputs basically. I want an input for the song title and an input for the song artist. Before I do those though, let's do an H4 to say add a new song. Alright, so after this we can do our first input. That is going to be of type text. The placeholder is going to be song title, and it's going to be required. We also need a V model so we can track this, and we'll set it equal to title. Alright, so we need another input now, which is also of type text. The placeholder this time is going to be equal to artist. It's also required. And again, we need a V model, which this time is going to be called artist. And we'll create those properties down here later on. Now after that, we need a button. So let's create that as well. Button and add. Okay, so if we take a look at this right now, over here, we can see this form. And again, those styles come from the global styles we created at the very start of this project. But what I want to do is just add a few extra styles. So let me come down here and paste them in. And I'm going to make sure these are scoped because we're styling the form and I don't want it to style other forms on the website. So if we take a look at this, we're saying text align everything to the center inside add song and give it a margin top. The form, the max width is 100% this time instead of the max width it has right here, and we're text aligned to the left. So if I save it now, it looks a little different. Okay, so that's the form to add in a new song. Now we need to create the refs for these things right here. So let's do that inside a setup function. So setup, and we'll say const, and the first one is going to be the title. Set that equal to a ref. Press enter to auto import ref. And this is going to be an initial value of just an empty string. The same is going to be true for the artist. So const artist is equal to a ref, which is an empty string to begin with. We need to return those at the end so we can use them in a template as vModels. So title and artist, like so. Okay, so we have those and everything should work. However, what I'd like to do now is not show this form by default and instead show a little button that says add songs or something like that. And when they click on that button, then you see the form. Because if we show it by default, it looks a little bit messy. So let's do that. Let's create a button, first of all, above the form. So button, and inside we'll say add songs, like so. Now, I want to track whether to show this or not. At the start, I want to show it, but once they've clicked it, I want to show this instead and not this. So what I'm going to do is create a ref to toggle whether we show the button or the form. So I'm going to call this show form, and it's going to be equal to a ref, and the initial value will be false, meaning we won't show the form to begin with. So I'm going to apply viv to this and say that's equal to show form. Now, because this is false to begin with, it's not going to show over here. We do see the add songs though. Now, I want to also apply viv to this, v-if, and set that equal to not show form. So if show form is false, then the whole statement is true, and then this will show. So we're either going to show this or this, right? So it should have no effect to begin with. We show that because the show form variable down here is false. Now then, when we click on this, I want to toggle this from false to true so that this hides and this shows. So let's add a click event to this, at click, and then we set this equal to some kind of statement. Now we could reference a function right here to run that logic, but since the logic is going to be very simple, we'll just do it directly inside these quotations. So all I want to do is take show form and set it equal to true. So at that point, this will no longer show, but this will. So if I save this now, I'm going to click on this and it doesn't work. So let's refresh. Now if I click on this, still doesn't work. So let's have a look what's going on. And it's because we've not returned show form down here. You always have to remember to do that, unlike me. So let's now refresh and see if this works. Add songs, and yep, now we see this form. Okay, so now we need to add an event listener to this form, a submit event listener for when they add a new song. So let's do that now. I'm going to go to the form and say at submit and set it equal to some kind of function. That is going to be a handle submit function. We also want to prevent the default action, so let's tack that on. Dot prevent to prevent the default action of the form being submitted. That's the page refreshing. So down here we need to create this handle submit function. Let's do that. Const handle submit is equal to a function. And then remember we have to return this down here. Handle submit so we can use it up here in the template. Now then, this is ultimately going to be an async function because what we're doing here is interacting with the database. And what we want to do is edit a specific document. Now, we're going to do the actual editing and the updating of the document in the next lesson. But to begin with, what I'm going to do is create a new object which represents the new song. And that object will ultimately be added to the songs array inside the document. So let's create that new object first. So const, and we'll call this new song and set it equal to an object. And inside this object, each song is going to have a title property, an artist, and also an ID. Just in case we need to reach out to that song later and delete it, we can identify it. So the title is going to be the value of this ref. So we'll say title.value. The artist, the value of the artist ref. So we say artist.value. And then we need an ID. Now, I'm just going to use the math object to generate an ID. If you prefer, you can use a third-party library to do this, and it would probably get you a more unique one. For the sake of this tutorial, this will do. So I'm going to say math.floor, which kind of grounds a number if it's a decimal. For example, if it was 2.34, it would bring it down to 2. And then inside here, we're going to pass in math.random. Like so, that gets us a random number between 0 and 1, for example 0.7342, etc, etc, and then we're going to times that by a large number like 1,000,000 or something like that, and that basically gets us a random number between 1 and 1,000,000. All right, so I know the chances are very unlikely that we will get a duplicate ID, but it is possible. So for that reason, maybe use a third-party library for your IDs. But again, for the sake of this lesson, this is absolutely fine. It gets us that random ID for the song. So that right there is our new song object. What I'm going to do is just log this to the console so we can see that everything works. Console.log, and then we'll say new song like so. So let's see if this works. I'm going to come over here and open up the console. And if we click on add song, let's just do some random strings right here, add this, and we can see the new song object and this ID right here. So next we can see how to update a document so that we can add this object to the songs array right here. So we'll do that in the next lesson. So as of yet in this entire course we've not seen how to update existing documents properly in Firestore. So now I'd like to show you how to do that, because we need users to be able to add new songs to their playlists using this form we created. And in order to do that, it requires us making updates to the songs property inside the playlist document. So this property right here. So we need to know now how to update Firestore documents. So to update a document in Firestore is relatively simple. First of all, we get a reference to a specific document inside a collection. Then when we have that, we use the update method on it and we pass in an object. And this object represents the different updates that we want to make to that document. So we just pass in the properties into this object and the values of those properties that we want to update. In this case, we would just update the title and description. Now, all of the rest of the properties would be untouched because we don't pass those into the object. We only pass in the things that we want to update, and it updates those for us. So let's have a go at this now in our project. So to do this, I'm going to place all of our logic inside the use document composable right here, because that's what this function is doing, using a document. And much like we have a delete doc function inside here, we're going to create an update doc function as well. So what I'm going to do is actually just copy all of this and paste it down here, because it's going to be very, very similar. And we just need to update a few things. So the name of the function is going to be update doc. And then down here, inside the try block, we want to change this right here to update, like so. Now, we're still doing this. This is exactly the same. Is pending is going to be true because we're starting a new process. The value of the error is reset to null. We try to update the document right here, and we can store the response object in a constant. And then when this is done, we set is pending to false and return that response object just in case we need it in the future. And again down here, if there is an error, we catch it. We log that to the console. We set is pending value to false again, and then we update the value of the error. Now we'll just change this. We'll say could not update the document. Okay, so there's one thing missing here. We need to pass in the updates object right here. So in our case, that would be something like this, the songs, and then the new songs inside this array. Well, in fact, this array would be all of the songs. We can't just place the new songs in here, because then it would update the whole songs property and it would just contain that new song in the array. We want to add that new song to the array. We'll worry about that later. Either way, we need to take in an object right here. Now what I'm going to do is pass that in as an argument when we call update doc. So we'll call this updates, and then we can just pass in here updates. So when we call this function, we pass in an object which represents the updates that we want to make. So that's pretty much it. Now we can just come down here and return that function update doc, and we can go ahead and use it now inside our add song component. Alright then, so it's right here inside the handle submit function that we want to call that function that we just created, which is called update doc. Now first of all, we need to import that. So let's import use document, import, and then use document from, and then @/composables, and then we want the use document file. Okay, So now we can extract that update doc function from use document. Let's say const, and we want update doc. Set that equal to use document and invoke it. So now we have access to this function. So all I want to do, instead of logging this to the console down here, is use this function. So I'm going to say await, and then it's update doc, like so, and we pass in the updates right here. So remember, that's an object. Now, what property do we want to update? Well, we want to update the songs property. And what's the new value of that property going to be? Well, it has to be all of the current songs that are currently in the array. And I know to begin with, that's nothing, but later down the line, there might already be 5 or 6 songs in that array. But then we also want to add on the extra song right here. Okay? So what we could do then is spread all of the current songs inside this array first of all. Now, the way we do that is by using some props. So what I'd like to do is pass into this component the playlist that we're updating so that we can access the song list from the props. So let me go into the playlist details first of all, and you can see we have add song and we pass in the current playlist, right? So we can accept this prop now inside here by saying props and then playlist, like so. And then inside the setup function, we can take in those props. Does that make sense? So on the playlist details component, we have access to the playlist, that individual playlist. We pass it into the add song component as a prop. Therefore, we can receive it right here, and we can access it now on the props object inside the setup function. So I could say inside songs now, spread, so 3 dots, and then props dot playlist, and then we have the songs array on that playlist. So what it does is look at the songs array, and it spreads all of the elements inside the array currently into this new array. Now, on top of that, we want to add in another item, which is this new song right here. So we can just pass in new song as well. Okay? So now all of this should work. We should now be updating the document with this property right here. So it keeps all of the current songs, but also adds the new one. Now, after this, I'd also like to clear out these 2 fields so they can add a new one easily. So we add a song and then it resets these values. So underneath this, I'm going to say title.value is equal to an empty string, and that resets this ref right here, which remember is applied as a V model to this input. So it clears out that, and then we'll do the same thing with the description, or rather not the description, sorry, the artist. So artist.value, and set that equal to an empty string as well. Okay, so if we save this now, fingers crossed, this should all work. I'm going to open up the console because I think there's an error. And it says right here, firestore.collection cannot be called with an empty path. And that is because if we open up the use document function right here, we can see we have to pass in a collection and an ID. Now, we don't currently do that when we use this composable right here. So when we're trying to make a reference to a document, these things are empty, the collection and ID. So let's pass in the collection, first of all, which is playlists, and then the ID of the document, which is going to be on the props right here because we have access to that playlist. So props.playlist.id. Okay, so that gets us the ID of the individual playlist. Now we're accessing that document, and when we try to update it, it's updating that document. Okay, so let's save this, and I'm going to refresh over here, and now we can see this thing right here. Don't worry too much about that error for now. Okay, so I'm going to add a new song. The song title, I'm just going to say test, and then whatever. I'm going to add this song. And we don't see any change over here. There's no song listed, but that's okay because we're not doing that yet. But this has cleared. Now, if we go over here, we can see we've added this new song. It has an ID, a title, and an artist. Now, if I add another one, like so, and come over to the database, you can see now we have 2 songs. So it added that new one, but kept the old one. And that, my friends, is how we update Firestore documents. Next, what we'll do is try to list all of these songs in the song list right here. Okay, so now we have a few songs inside the songs array for this playlist. How about we try to output those songs right here? So I'm in the playlist details component, and this is where I'm going to place the song list right here, just above the add song component. Now, what I could do is put all of this logic in a different component and then reuse that component if I wanted to. However, I'm only going to use the song list in one place right here, so I don't need to put it in another component. I'm just going to do it directly in this one. So the first thing I want to do is check, do we have any songs? Because if we don't, if the array is empty, I want to output a message that says something like, no songs have been added yet. So remember, we have access to the playlist already because we set up a real-time listener right here where we used get document for that playlist, and we return it right here. So what we need to do in the template is access the songs property on that playlist. So let's do a div first of all, which is going to say something like no songs have been added to this playlist yet. Okay, now if I save this, then we're going to see it regardless of whether the songs or not. Now this particular playlist does have songs even though we're not showing them yet, so I'd only like to output this if it doesn't have a length. So let's do a viv on this and set it equal to playlist.songs.length, and I want to place an exclamation mark at the start of this to say not. So now only if the songs doesn't have length, i.e. there's no items in the array, will this show. Now if I save this, we shouldn't see it because there are songs in this playlist. But if I go to the other one, which is up here, then we can see this because there's no songs in this playlist. Okay, so that works then. Now then, the next thing I'd like to do is use a v-for to cycle through all the songs and output each one. So let's do another div, and I'm going to give this a class of single-song just so we can style it later on. Now I also want to use v-for on this, so v-for, and that's equal to something, and it's going to be song in playlist.songs. So we're cycling through the songs array on the playlist and referring to each one as a song. We also need a key, and we bind to that, so :key is equal to the song ID. Remember, we add an ID to the song, and we can see that right here. So we use that property for the key. Alright, so what do we want to do for each song? Well, I want to output the song title and the song artist. So let's do a div with a class of details, first of all, inside here. And then I'm going to do an h3 for the song title. So song.title. And then under that, I'm going to do a paragraph tag for the song artist, like so. So if I save and preview now, we can see we get these things right here. Now the song artist isn't being output because I've misspelt it, so artist. Okay, cool. So now we see the song and the artist. Now these are obviously junk songs, but don't worry about that, we'll add some real ones later. I also want to add a button to be able to delete this song as well. So let me do that below the details. I'm going to create a button, and then I'm going to say delete, like so. And now we can see that button right here. So we're not going to hook up the functionality just yet, we'll do that later on, but this delete thing right here, I only want to show that if the user has ownership of the playlist, because if I go to someone else's playlist, it's going to show me that delete button. I don't want to show that if I don't own the playlist. So I'm going to say viv right here and set it equal to ownership. And now only if I have ownership of the playlist will I see that. So let me save it, and I can still see it. Awesome, because I am logged in as Luigi. Now if I log out and log back in as Mario at google.com and then test1234, log in, and then I'm going to go back to this playlist. Now I don't see the delete button, okay? Now I'm just going to log out and log back in as Luigi because I want to style those things and I want to be able to see that button. So Luigi at google.com and then test1234, log in. Oops, this should be Google. Log in and then go back to this playlist so we can see the button. Okay, so I just want to make this look a little bit better. So I'm going to paste in a CSS rule down here, like so, and it's the single song that we're targeting. So this thing right here, if I scroll up, we see single song right here. So the div surrounding all of the song details. So what I say right here is a bit of padding, top and bottom, display as flex, and that means this and this are going to sit left to right rather than on top of each other. And then justified content, space between, that means it puts a load of space between this and this. So this essentially will sit way over on the right. And then align item center, that's vertically. We give each single song a border bottom, which is dashed, and it's that variable color, that secondary gray color. And then the margin bottom of each song is 20 pixels, just to give them some breathing room. So now if we take a look at this, it looks a lot nicer. All right, we can't delete them yet. This is not doing anything. But if I add in a new song, for example, all along the watch tower, if I can spell it, by Bob Dylan. If I add this now, then we should see it right here because we have that real-time listener set up for the document, and since we're editing the document, we're getting that snapshot back and we're showing that new data. So this is now all working, but we still need to figure out how to delete songs as well, and we'll do that next. Alright then, so time for a challenge, and what I'd like you to do in this challenge is figure out how to delete songs when a user clicks on these delete buttons. So to do this, you'll need to attach a click handler to the delete song button, which is this thing right here, and call that handler handle click. So you'll need to create that function down here inside the setup. Then inside that function, use the update doc function to delete that song. Remember, we have access to the update doc function from use document, so we can grab it from there. And then you'll need to pass the song ID into the handle click function. So the function that you associate with the click event, you need to pass in the song ID. And just a little hint, in order to do this, in order to remove that song, you'll not need to use the filter method, but it would be a wise idea to use the filter method. So have a good go at this, pause it right now, and then if you want to check out my solution, just press play again. Okay then, so the first thing I'm going to do is add a click event handler to this delete button, and I'm going to set it equal to a function called handle click. Now remember, I said we need to pass in the song ID as an argument right here because we need to know what song to delete from the array. Now we have access to the ID because we have the song object right here. So let's say song.id, and that is the ID property on the song. We also use that as the key right here, remember. Okay, so now we can create this handle click function down here, which I'm going to do. Const handle click, like so, is equal to a function. We take in the ID, remember, and oops, let me come back over here. Then we need to return this so we can use it in the template, handle click, like so. Now this thing right here is going to be an async function because we're going to use an asynchronous task inside it. And remember, we need to extract a method from use document, and that is update doc. Let's just go back into composables and go to use documents. It's this method we want right here, and we need to pass in the updates. Remember, that is an object. So let us now import that from use documents, or rather destructure it from it, and it's update doc, like so. Okay, so now we can start to flesh out this function down here. Well, what I want to do is create an updated value for songs first of all. So to do that, I'm going to create a new constant, and I'm going to call it songs, but you can call it what you want. And I'm going to set that equal to the current playlist that we have, dot value, because this is a ref after all, and then grab the songs property, and then we're going to use the filter method. Now remember, the filter method fires a function for each song in that array now. And if we return true for that song, it keeps it in the array. If we return false, we filter it out of the array. So we end up with a filtered array, which is then being stored in this constant songs. And that will be the new array that we want to pass on to Firestore. So what do I want to do inside this function? Well, first of all, we get access to each individual song right here. And then I'm going to get rid of these parentheses because we can do it all in one line. All I want to do is say, does the song ID, so the ID of the song that we're currently iterating, not equal to the ID? So this ID that we're passing in here, if they are not equal, it means we want to keep that song in the array because the IDs don't match. So therefore we return true because we're saying they're not equal. If we return true, we keep that song in the array. Now if this ID matches this song, then this statement is going to be false. Now that means that that's the song that we want to remove from the array. So since we're returning false, we remove it, we filter it out, and it's taken out of the array. So at the end of all this, we have the new songs array, which contains all of the original songs minus the one that we want to delete. So now what we can do is call update doc. So I'll say await update doc, and we pass in an object, remember, because we take in that object over here, the updates, and we use that to update the document. That is an object, and all we have to do is say what properties we want to update. Well, we want to update the songs property. So if we go to the database, remember, that's this property right here. And all we're doing is saying the new value of that is this thing right here. So songs. Now, because this and this are the same name, I can just delete this like so, and it does exactly the same thing. That's just shorthand. So now all we're doing is passing the updated songs property into the update doc function, and that's going to update that property in Firestore with the new array. So it should filter out the song we're trying to delete. So let me refresh over here, make sure I saved. Yes, I did. And then let me try to delete some songs. So delete, and it goes. Delete, and it goes. Awesome. So that is now working. Alright, so we're making a lot of progress on this website now. We can now log in, log out, sign up, create playlists. We can list playlists, list songs, add new songs, delete playlists, etc. All of the core functionality is done. But there's a few more things I want to do. First of all, I like to create a new page or view which only shows the current user's playlists. So if I'm logged in as Mario, I can click a link that says My Playlists in the navbar, and then that link will route me to a view very much like the home page, which lists these different playlists, but this time instead of listing playlists by every user, it only shows those created by me, the user that's logged in. So that's what we're going to do now. So the first thing I want to do is create a new view. Let me just cross off these two things here and create that inside the playlists folder. So I'm going to call this user playlists.view. Then inside that we'll boilerplate it, so view, enter, and then the template will just create a div with a class of user-playlists, so we can style this later on, and then also inside that an h2 that says my playlists like so. So that's all I want to do for now. Now we need to hook this up inside our router file as well, so let's go to that, and at the bottom we'll create this new route object. So first of all, the path. The path for this is going to be /playlists/user. Now that is not a route parameter. We don't need to pass in the user ID or anything like that because we can get the user ID from the authentication service by getting the current user. So that doesn't need to be a route parameter. This is just a hard-coded path, /playlists/users. And we're going to name this user playlists like so. And then the components is going to be user playlists, and then finally we're going to say before enter and apply our auth guard, which is require auth, because I don't want unauthenticated users to be able to go to this route. Okay, so that's the route setup. Let's give this a whirl. I'm going to go to /playlists/user and press enter. Now nothing's there, so let's make sure this is correct. We need to import this. So let's do that at the top, and instead of playlist details we need to say user playlists like so. Save that, and now we can see my playlists if we go to this route. Okay then, so now what I'd like to do also is create a link inside the navbar that goes to this. So let's create that as well. I'm going to go to the components folder, then open navbar, and we only want to show this link if there is a user, if they're logged in. So inside this div right here. So I'll place it underneath create playlists. I'm going to duplicate that one, and this time it's going to be user playlists for the name, user playlists, and then instead of create playlist we'll say my playlists like so. Save that and test this out, and we can see that link, my playlist, and it goes to my playlist. But if I log out, I don't see that link in the top. I'm going to log back in again, mario@google.com, and then test 1, 2, 3, 4, like so. Now there's one more thing I want to do. When I log in and when I sign up, I want to redirect the user automatically to my playlist, this page right here, because at the minute, if I log in or sign up, and I'll show you this again, nothing happens. Mario@google.com and test 1, 2, 3, 4. If I log in, it logs me in, but it just keeps me on this page and it doesn't really do much. I want to redirect them then to my playlists once they've logged in, and the same for sign up as well. So let's go to those components down here. It's inside the auth folder, and first of all, a login. So we want to do it down here after we've logged in and there's no error. So to do this, we need the router. So let's import it. So import, and it's use router, and that comes from Vue-router like so. So now we can use that down here. Let's do it underneath use login. I'll say const router is equal to use router and invoke that. Now we can use that instead of logging this to the console to redirect them to the my playlists route. So let's do that. I'm going to say router, and I'm going to say push to push on a new route, and then the name of the component I want to go to is the user playlists components. All right, so let's try that. I'm going to go to logout and then log in. So mario@google.com and then test 1, 2, 3, 4, log in, and now it still doesn't work. Let me try that again. I'm going to say mario@google.com and then test 1, 2, 3, 4, log in, and now it works. We just had to refresh. It redirects us to my playlists. Now I want to do the same thing for the sign up page as well. So what I'm going to do is just copy a couple of things. I'm going to open up sign up. So first of all, the import, I've copied that. Then I'm going to copy this thing right here and paste that just down here. And then finally this thing, I'm going to copy that and paste it inside sign up as well down here and save it. And now let's try signing up as someone else. So I'm going to say Bowser and then Bowser@google.com and then test 1, 2, 3, 4, sign up, and then hopefully this will work. I might need to refresh the page, but let's just see. Nope, it works, and it sends us to the my playlists page. So now we have this page. Let's start to flesh it out next. Now sometimes when we get documents from a collection, we only want some of those documents. For example, if we had a blogs collection in Firestore, then we might want to get all of the blog documents in that collection which have a specific category, like sport or tech or something else. Now at the moment, when we're getting the playlists collection, we're just grabbing all of the documents in that collection to show them on the home page right here. But on this page, we need to grab only playlists in the collection which are ones created by the user that's currently logged in. So we need to get the playlists which have a specific user ID property. Remember, when we create a playlist, we apply the user ID to that playlist. So if I'm logged in as Mario, I need to grab all of the playlists with my user ID. So how do we perform these kind of queries to get only certain documents in a playlist? Well, if we take a look at the Firestore documentation, we can see that the first step is to get a reference to a specific collection. Now, where they're using this DB variable, we've been using Project Firestore, but that's just the name of a variable. So we get a reference to a collection, and then from there, we attach the where method to that reference. And this is where we perform the query. So what we're saying is we want documents here where a certain condition is true. So for example, where the property state is equal to CA, okay? Or where the capital property is equal to true. So that's what we can do. We can do something like we want all the playlists where the user ID is equal to a specific ID string. So that's what we're going to do in our project. Okay, so we want to get all of the user playlists inside this component, user playlists. So in order to get that collection, we're going to use this composable get collection. So first let's import it. Import get collection from @/composables / get collection. And then we can use it inside the setup function. So we'll say const, and we want to extract the documents. We get those back from this composable. and that's equal to get collection, and we pass in the collection we want, which is playlists. Okay, remember these documents come back from the get collection composable right here. Now I want to call these something else within the context of this setup function in our template. So to do that, remember, we can just say colon and then the name that we want to call them. So I'm going to call them playlists. All right, and then we just need to return playlists at the bottom. So now we could use these inside the template. But this is going to be all of the playlists. This will set up a real-time listener for all of those playlists. And I only want playlists where the user ID is equal to the user ID on the playlist. So how do we do that? Well, we use that where method. So what we need to do is tack on a where method to the collection ref that we have right here. And that would look something like this, dot where, and then the condition inside that. Now, I don't want to hard code that on here because the condition might be different for different times that we use this composable. And in some cases, we might not even use a where method. For example, on the homepage, we don't want to say where something because we just want all the documents. So I don't want to hard code it onto the collection. Instead, what I'd like to do is pass it in as an argument, the query, when we call get collection. And then if we pass this in, we can detect it and we can tack it on to the collection ref. If we don't pass it in, then we don't need to tack it on and we just get all of the documents. I hope that makes sense. So then, we need to pass in this second argument. And that second argument is going to be the condition. Let's just go back over here to remind ourselves what this condition looks like. It's made up of 3 parts, 3 strings. We have the property name, and then this thing, which is equal to, and then this thing, which is the value. So ours is going to be where user ID, because if we take a look in the documents, we have the user ID property, that's what we're checking, is equal to the ID of the user that's currently logged in. So that will be a string ID. So we need to pass in these 3 values, but we're only accepting 1 argument, when in fact there should be 3 things. But I don't want to add an extra 2 arguments here, so there's 3. I just want 1 argument, the query. So what I could do is, as a second argument, pass in an array. And that array would have 3 parts in it. It would have the first part, the property, the second part, which is equal, and then the third part, the value. So let's do that. I'm going to scoot this down to the next line, so it gives us a bit more space to work with. So that's the first argument, playlists. The second argument is going to be an array. And the first item will be user ID. That's the property of the document that we're checking. The second element in this array is going to be double equals. And the third one is going to be the current user's ID. So we need to get the current user as well. So let's import get user from @/composables/get user. And let's grab the user down here. So const user is equal to get user like so. So now we have this user. We can grab the ID from that user by saying user.value, because user is a ref, and then .uid. So that's the ID of the user that's currently logged in. So here I'm saying, yeah, we want playlists, and we're going to use this inside the where method. The user ID is equal to the current user's ID who is logged in. So all we need to do is tack on this query thing right here to this collection ref when we accept it. But first of all, we have to check, has the user passed in this query argument? Because like I said, on the home page, we don't pass this in, we just pass in the collection. And only if we pass this in do we want to tack on the where clause. So let me come down here and we're going to do an if check to see if they've passed it in. So if query, then we'll tack it on. If they've not passed one in, this will be undefined, and so it won't run this bit of code. So I'll take the collection ref and I'll set it equal to the collection ref, and then dot where, and then we need to pass in the query. So all I'm doing is tacking this on to the collection ref at the end here after order by if there is a query. Now we need to get the 3 items from this array and place them in here as separate arguments, because this is not an array, this is just 3 separate arguments. So how do we do that? Well, all we need to do is use the spread syntax. So 3 dots and then the the query. And what that will do is take every item in this array and spread it out as 3 separate arguments inside this where method. And that's all there is to it. So then, my friends, now we are only going to be getting the playlists inside this component where the user ID property is equal to the ID of the user currently logged in. I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is console.log playlists down here. I'm going to save that and come back over here, and I'm going to open up the console. We have an error, but don't worry too much about that for now. I'm just going to refresh, and you can see right here it says this little message: the query requires an index. You can create it right here. So when we make a complex query, it's not really that complex at the minute, but any kind of query like this where we're passing in a where clause, we have to create an index for that, and that's so that Firestore can easily get that data when it needs it and that query comes in. Otherwise, it will take longer for it to return those results. So we can click on this link right here to create that index. So just click on create index right here, and then this will just take a few minutes. Okay then, so now we can see status is enabled, and when you see that, it means that we can use that query in our project. And by the way, this is a one-time thing. We don't have to make an index every time we make this query. It's just the first time we make a particular query, we have to make an index for it. But thereafter, we don't have to do this. So now if we go back to Muso Ninjas, what I'm going to do is clear that and refresh, and we should see this thing right here. Now it's saying that the raw value is an array with no playlists in it, but that's because I'm logged in as a new user that doesn't have any playlists yet. So what I'm going to do is log out and then log back in as Mario at google.com and then test1234 for the password, log in, and when I go to my playlist, we can see down here, if we open this up, the value right here has 1 item in it. So you can see this playlist and it's road trip music. Now, if we go to the homepage, there's 2 playlists in total, but it's only getting me this one, road trip music, which is the one created by me, Mario. So in the next video, what we're going to do is cycle through these playlists and output them right here in this component. Okay, so now we have access to all of the playlists by the current user who is logged in. We return them right here so we can use them in the template to output them to the browser. Now, in order to do that right here, we're going to reuse a component we created earlier called ListView. And remember, this takes in a prop called playlists and it cycles through those and outputs them to the browser. Now, we used this component earlier for the homepage, and that's how we output these. We're going to do the same thing for my playlist, only this time the playlist prop is not going to be all of the playlists, just the playlist by the current user logged in. So let's give this a whirl. First of all, I need to import the ListView component. So import ListView from @/components/ListView.view. And then after that, we need to register this inside our current component. So let's do that. Components, which is an object, and inside we register ListView, and then don't forget your comma. So now we can use this component inside our template and pass in our playlists. Now, before I do that, I want to do a div and apply a viv to this because I want to make sure that we have a value for playlists before I try to output the list view. So remember, playlist starts off at null. If we take a look inside get collection right here. So that's the documents, which we get back right here, and we call them playlists. That will be null to begin with. I only want to output the list view once we have a value for playlists. So let's do this, list view. And we need to pass in a prop, which is called playlists. And the data we pass in is playlists. So that's the data right here. Okay, so that's all there is to it. Now, if I save this and preview, I can see just the playlists created by me. Now, at the minute, there's only one because Mario has only created one, and I can verify that by going to the homepage, Mario and Luigi. But if I now try to create a new playlist, and I'll say ambient, relaxation, and then playlist description, some relaxing tunes, ... I'm going to choose a file, and this can be space. Let's create that. And now there's no songs in this, but if I go to my playlists now, I can see both of those because these are my playlists. If I go to the home page, I see all three. All right, cool. So that's working, but also what I'd like to do is at the bottom over here, have a button saying something like create a new playlist. So from here, we can go to this screen as well. So let's do that now. So below this div, we don't need to place it inside the viv because I'm going to show this regardless. I'm going to do a router-link. I'm going to close this off. And then this is going to go to, and we use an object here where we say the name of the component is going to be create playlist. That was the name we gave this component, or rather this route. And then inside here, I'm going to say create a new playlist, like so. Now, if I save this and preview, we can see this button at the bottom. We need to apply a class to this to style it, and that class is going to be btn. Now, that is already styled, remember, from our global styles inside main.css. We styled the buttons somewhere. I think they're up here, right here, btn. So we don't have to do anything else. It looks like this, and that is a bit better now. And if I click it, it goes to this component. Okay then, so we have pretty much done this project, but there's one more little thing I'd like to do, and that is to add in the username into the navbar when a user is logged in. For example, if I'm logged in as Mario, it will say something like, "Hi there, Mario," in the navbar, just so I know I'm logged in as me. So let's do that inside the navbar component over here. I'm going to get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. And what I'd like to do is use the user inside the navbar because we want their display name. Now we already have access to that because we use the get user composable and we return the user right here. Currently we're using it to dynamically output different links. So what I'd like to do is output the user display name inside this div right here when there is a user logged in. So let's do a span tag for this, and inside the span I'm just going to say hi there and then comma and then user.display name. You could do the email if you prefer, entirely up to you. I'm going to do the display name, press save, and now it says hi there Mario right here. Now I just want to style this a little bit, so let me come down to the bottom and paste in this style, and it's just targeting the span tag, font size 14 pixels, display inline block, bit of margin left, bit of padding left, and a border left as well of a very light grey. So let's save that. And now that looks a little bit better. Now, if I log out, then we don't see that. I'm going to log in as someone else. Let me say Bowser at google.com and then test 1, 2, 3, 4. Log in and we can see hi there Bowser. Now, this is not showing anything, but I feel like I just need to refresh here for it to catch those changes. Now, there's no playlist here, but that's all right because Bowser doesn't have any playlists. And if he did create one, let me just say test, and then I'm going to upload a file. We'll do reading, create. Hopefully now it will show this on my playlists. There we go, test created by Bowser. So if I go to the home page, I can see all of them as well. So there we go, my friends. That's this project pretty much created. There is one more thing left to do, and that is to build and deploy this application. So we'll do that next. Okay then, so there's one last step here, and that is to build and deploy the application. So let us do that by coming over to a terminal and saying npm run build, and that will build our Vue application into something that we can deploy. And then when that's done, inside dist, all of this is the final build. So we just need to deploy that now by typing Firebase deploy like so, and this deploys our whole application to Firebase. Firestore rules and also storage rules included. Now, just as we're doing this, we get this message. The following indexes are defined in your project, but they're not present in your Firestore index file. So remember before when we created that Firestore query, and we did that by clicking a link and it did it directly in our Firebase console on the back end over here. Well, now what it's saying is inside our indexes file over here, we don't have that index. So it's saying, would you like to delete the indexes? And it says selecting no will continue with the rest of deployment. Now, we don't want to delete the index that's currently on the back end. So we need to select no and then press enter. And that way, all of those indexes that we create will still be on the back end, even though they're not inside this local file. Okay, and that is the deploy complete. So if we go over to hosting, hopefully we will see this now. And we can see right here, this is the current version. So I'm going to open this up in a browser by clicking on this. And hopefully, yep, we can see the project. I'm just going to test this out by typing mario@google.com and then test 1, 2, 3, 4, and then logging in. And yep, everything still works. Awesome. Now remember, if you want to, you can also lock down your Firebase API key. So that was the thing inside the Firebase config file right here from the Google Developer Tools. And I showed you how to do that earlier in the course. So just check out that video again if you want to do that for your newly deployed application. Okay then, so we have finally reached the end of this project. Now, there are more things you could do with this. You could maybe implement some kind of like system where users can favorite other people's playlists. You could maybe add also a comment section at the bottom of each playlist. There's tons more you could do with it. And if you manage to add any extra functionality to the project, definitely leave a link to your finished website in the Q&A for others to see and maybe get inspiration from. Now, you could also add Firebase functions to your applications, which is another service that Firebase offers. And what they do is allow you to perform server-side logic to manipulate your data, your storage, etc. And if you want to learn more about that, I've got a completely free course on Firebase functions right on my YouTube channel. So I'll leave the link to that attached to this lecture. Also, definitely check out the Vue docs. They have lots of examples of how to use all of the features we've seen in this course. And if things do change, they will be well documented here too. Finally, thank you so much for watching this course. I really hope you've enjoyed the journey, and I hope you stick around on my YouTube channel for more free tutorials.